What is up, math superstars? In this edition of Mr. Peterson Presents, I'm bringing to you information about what we call perfect squares. So for perfect squares, these are numbers that result from multiplying any whole number by itself. So now let's go ahead and take a look at some examples of perfect squares. So we'll start at 1 squared. So 1 to the power of 2, we call this 1 squared because in a moment we're going to draw a square. So we write this as 1 times 1, it equals 1. And so we can actually draw this out here. Let's pick a little thicker pen here. So the way we draw this out on our grid paper here, we're going to draw out a 1 by 1 square. We're going to go ahead and label our sides 1 and 1. Because when we find out the area of this square, it's going to tell us that the area is 1. And so we can say that 1 here is a perfect square. So whatever the area is after we multiply the length times the width of the square gives us a perfect square number. So let's try 2 squared. So 2 squared is 2 times 2, which is equal to 4. So we can say that 4 is a perfect square. So let's go ahead and draw out our perfect square here. So let's go ahead and draw out our length is 2 and our width is 2. Let's go ahead and finish out our square. And we can tell that the area is 4 because it has 4 squares in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go ahead and label that on the inside as 4. So we can say that 4 is a perfect square number. Let's go to 3 squared. So 3 squared is very simply, let's 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 gives us 9. And so here's the way this is going to look. So we draw our length is 3 and our width is 3. So we go and finish out our square. Hope I can trace the lines. So we label our length and our width is 3. And that gives us a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 squares in the middle. So we can say that 9 is a perfect square. And of course, we can keep going on and on and on here. So I'll do one more example here. So we have 4 times 4. This gives us 16. So we say that 16 is a perfect square number. So let's go ahead and prove it. Let's go ahead and draw out our perfect square. So let's go ahead and draw out our length of 4 and our width. And let's go ahead and label that. We'll make sure to label all of our sides here. And our width is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to draw that out there. Nice. We label that as 4. So we know that there are 16 squares in the middle after we count that out. So we can say that 16 is a perfect square number. And we keep going on and on and on. So for today's practice, we're going to make it all the way up to 20 squared, which is 20 times 20, which equals 400. And so we'll take a look at that here as we do some more practice. We are now in part 2 of this video lesson here. This is for objective 7.1D. Now we're going to talk about square roots. So with square roots, all of this is and taking the square root is your first fill in the blank of a perfect square number. This will give you the dimensions of one side of the square. And so your answers should always come out to whole numbers in dealing with perfect square numbers. So let's take a friendly little example here. So in the part 1 of this lesson, we realized that 4 squared is 4 times 4, which gave us 16. And what we did was we drew out our square here. So we went 1, 2, 3, 4. We labeled that as side length is 4. We did that again. Our side length is 4. And we drew out our square. Some of you probably squares are a little better than mine. And your answer was 16. So all we're doing now is, if you see, this is called the radical sign, and 16 underneath of that. So this is telling us, this right here means the square roots of 16. So all that means is we're looking to identify one of the sides of the square. And so we can say that the square root of 16 would be, let me write this out, square root of 16 would be equal to 4. So we're just looking for one side of the square. Now, if you have one of these handy dandy Mr. Peterson Math Approved calculators here, what you can do is first step is you're going to type in, hopefully this works, you're going to type in 16 on the calculator. So you can see why I circled 1 and I circled 6. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to highlight this in yellow so you can see this. Here is the square root button right there. So after you type in 16, you press that button. That is a square root button. It will automatically give you the number 4. So go ahead and pause the video, try that, ensure that your handy dandy Mr. Peterson approved math calculator works. And that's a really easy way to check about the square root of a number. And so for the sake of our lessons here, we're dealing with whole numbers, but you can also hit the square root of any number and you'll get a decimal. So say if you hit the square root of 200, for instance, in your calculator, when you do that, I'm pulling out my Mr. Peterson approved math calculator right now. So it's 200, press the square root button. You should get a number of 14.14 and a decimal goes on forever. That tells us that the square root of 200, one of those sides, if we were to measure it out, is 14.14 rounded about units. And so if you want to hit square root, you might hit the square root of 196. If you did 196 and press the square root button, you get 14 as a whole number. And so we're really identifying just the square roots of whole numbers in this lesson. But that square root button will be very, very helpful for you.